Oh, there she goes. Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. Today we're talking about all the stories that the DCU will be made of. We can talk about Batman, we'll talk about Superman, we've got Justice League, maybe there'll be Crypto, the Superdog. That's going to be fun. Oh, yep. Uh, and to talk about all that and so much more, we've got with us today John. How are you doing today?
Finally, I'm not the hairiest one on the stream right now.
No.
We're good. Um, but yeah, I wanted to talk about I feel like there's a lot of talk about adaptations and inspirations for the DCU. Gonna move my camera so I'm not. Anyway, but considering that David Corenswet did mention that Superman is not gonna be is going to have All-Star Superman and Superman for All Seasons be like the main inspirations, and then Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is literally adapting that comic book. Brave and the Bold is allegedly adapting Batman and Son by Grant Morrison. So I wanted to talk about just like kind of the vibe of that a little bit, and then kind of go into like what I would love to see in stuff that's been confirmed and stuff that hasn't been confirmed, and just kind of have like a rough idea of like what I would want to see and like what could work about an adaptation but also not, and then inspirations and not. So I think adaptations are an interesting thing. I think um adaptations are kind of just an intriguing premise is all. It's I feel like adaptations kind of put you in a box a little bit. Like if you don't adapt this thing perfectly, then people won't like it. Like for instance, I know that a lot of people didn't like how Wolverine was the guy who went back in time in Days of Future Past. A lot of people wanted more of a adaptation of Civil War. They wanted to see more characters in that to properly adapt that storyline, even though that storyline is like fucking 400 comics long with the amount of tie-ins it has. So there's like a whole bunch of things. I feel like adaptations are kind of not the right way to go because it just puts you too much of it in a box. I feel like adaptations are really good. Stick those to like animated films, like Crisis and Dark Knight Returns, Under the Red Hood, Superman Earth One, that kind of thing. Because I just feel like that animated movies, that's what they should do. Stick to those and build like their cinematic universes off of that. And then kind of, even though apparently Crisis, they're really doing their own thing with that, according to a buddy of mine who's watched them so far, and just kind of do that because inspiration is, I feel like it's just cleaner, I guess, because then you have the writer who clearly, well, hopefully, loves the source material enough that's like, okay, I want to grab from this, I want to grab from this, I want to grab from this, and then just create something fresh and new. So you're not like, oh, I know what happens because it's an adaptation. So I know beat for beat what's going on. And then on top of that, they can put their own stamp on it, put their own inflection on the character, and pretty much do their own thing, which I just think that that's way more interesting. And with that, I wanted to talk about some, storylines, whether that be, graphic novels or just like, or mini series, maxi series, or just story arcs within a comic book run that I think they can use, either totally adapt them or more so, because I think it would be better be inspired by them to actually properly use them in whatever. So I think the first thing I wanted to talk about was Brave and the Bold because that's one of the few films that we don't have anything for. Like I believe, we do have. He did say Batman and Son, but that's just kind of like a rough estimate. And I think there's like, room for like, okay, what else to adapt? Considering the fact that, um, It seems like they're gonna have like the main villain be Ra's al Ghul or Talia al Ghul. I think a really good thing to be inspired by, which Grant Morrison was inspired by to create Batman and Son, was Batman Son of the Demon. That was adapted into the animated series back in the day. It was written by Mike W. Barr, and I believe he adapted his own comic into the animated series. I just think that would be really I just think that would make sense. Like, I don't know if they're actually gonna have Ra's al Ghul be the main villain. I don't know if they're just gonna have Damian Wayne, and then they're gonna like really go off on its own separate thing. And I have something for that in a minute. But I think it just seems like it makes sense that they'll have Ra's al Ghul and they'll have like a proper Ra's al Ghul rather than whitewashed Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins that
Well,
Liam
you know what
Neeson had,
the thing
which
about that was they went and they pronounced it all like Ra's al Ghul, and really the settings were all Middle Eastern, somewhere in Asia, but like they got Liam Neeson to do it, and then they gave him that weird mustache. So I'm
they
like,
gave him a Fu Manchu mustache. So it was
you know,
kind of weird. Like, don't get me wrong, Liam Neeson gave a terrific performance. That Batman Begins, great movie, but it just felt like kind of weird. Like, I feel like, what is this, Flash Gordon? Like, come on, you have like, Ming the Conqueror or whatever, and Max von Sydow and Yellowface. I'm glad they didn't try to put him in Yellowface. I mean, I'm very happy about that, but it's just like now that we like know a little bit better, it just comes off as a little bit awkward. So it's just like, okay, I understand he himself is not Asian. Like, they're not like trying to pretend that he is. It's just so weird that like a character that's steeped in either Tibetan or Middle Eastern like ideals and culture, and then they get an white ass Irish actor to play him. So to play like this version. So it's a little weird. I would like to see a better adapted Ra's al Ghul because we have gotten good Ra's al Ghuls. Like, I know Alexander Siddig, from what I've heard, he did a really good job in Gotham. The guy who they got to play in Arrow was surprisingly really good. I don't remember the actor's name, but he did a good job. So like there's possible you can, I would say you can either do East Asian or Middle Eastern. I think both can work. Um Obviously whoever's best in the role, get Alexander Siddig to come back. Hell, do that. But I think Son of the Demon just kind of makes sense if they want to do Ra's al Ghul as a villain, since we're getting Damian Wayne as Robin. However, if you want to steer clear from Ra's al Ghul, it's like, okay, we'll have Damian, but maybe we'll build up to Ra's al Ghul in like sequels, and then maybe they'll have like the classic trilogy, and they'll be like Ra's al Ghul will be the villain of a trilogy, or they might save him for like a future like Justice League villain type of thing, which I would be cool with because he's definitely that big of a threat. I mean, Tower of Babel was, he was the bad guy in that, and that's a very famous story. Not one of the ones I chose though, but I wouldn't mind seeing that either. But but what I picked, it's kind of cheating because I would say not necessarily adapt this storyline, but it's the best one I could find that's not reliant on New 52 stuff, because a lot of the stuff I found with this character was New 52, and I hate what they did to him for New 52, and that's In the Line of Duty, which is a story arc from Gotham Central. And considering the fact that we got heavy police stuff in the Batman, I don't think they would do that, but I would love to see Mr. Freeze done right, similar to Ra's al Ghul, even though not necessarily done right, but just done Ra's al Ghul done better, and then Mr. Freeze just done right. I would love to see this guy done right, and I think it would be more interesting to introduce like, okay, we have Damian Wayne, we have Talia al Ghul, we have Ra's al Ghul. Okay, we have all that, but we'll move on to like a more classic Batman adventure, which I could see them doing. And or they might not even introduce like Damian Wayne. Maybe Damian Wayne like is already Robin. Who knows if they're going to do that. So In the Line of Duty is kind of cheating, but it's written by Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, who, as we all know, both are writing episodes of Batman Cape Crusader, one of the few things I'm actually excited for with that show. But I think it would be kind of cool to like get this would be more so like inspiration, like just like rough idea of like kind of, Mr. Freeze and versus like Batman, but like using like bits and pieces of this. I think that like a really good Mr. Freeze story, and then just kind of for the most part doing its own thing, but like using this as like some really good ideas, because this was one that kept popping up. And it's got 2 comic book legends writing it. So you know what? Screw it. Might as well use that here. So I think that would be good for Brave and the Bold. But another one I wanted to talk about was Lanterns. Now, Lanterns is something that definitely can use, like you can adapt. Like I think that's better at adapting stuff, because you have multiple episodes to like have it feel like an actual comic book arc. Well, I have 2, like as all these I have 2 for. And the first one I have is, following kind of into that Grant Morrison thing that I feel like James Gunn is using a lot of, and do Green Lantern Intergalactic Lawman, which I have read. It's been a while, but I remember really liking it, even though it was kind of confusing. But I did end up really liking it. I thought Morrison did a really good job with that. I think they, really nailed like kind of more of that like surreal, cerebral aspect to it. Very like weird and out there. And I feel like they could like, I just feel like they could, you have a lot to work with here in terms of that. But this, but this is more, again, as well as the fact it follows into like kind of like a mystery that James Gunn described Lanterns as, which he described it as True Detective in space, which is like awesome. So I think that would be really cool. And I think this is definitely a good modern, story to like use. And it's I believe it's separated from main canon. I don't remember if it was in canon or outside of canon. Not really sure, but whatever it is, I think this was definitely I thought this was really good, and I really liked how, I just love the tone of it. Like not necessarily plot, but very like very
Well,
art heavy and very like tone surreal heavy,
well,
and I would love
yeah.
for them to carry that over here into
What's
Lanterns.
so my question to you would be, is the story of Intergalactic Lawman, does that work for something that's episodic? I mean, it might be a mini series for all we know. Like they don't necessarily. I mean, we don't know if they're gonna do multiple seasons of the show Lanterns, right?
Right.
So, how do
Yeah,
you
I
think that
mean,
would work?
this is a mini series. It's 6 issues, and I believe the controllers were the main villain, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly. If I'm misremembering, I apologize. Again, it's been 5 years since I read this thing, and so I just remember like I was really digging this. It was very dialogue heavy, which I think could definitely work for an actual show.
yeah,
And Liam Sharp's art. Well, I mean, all the artists. There were multiple, like colorists, pencilers. Liam Sharp, Steve Oliff, Tom Orzechowski. Um, I think they all did a really good job with this. Again, like it just like look at that, like
yep,
that, like
yeah,
just look at the shading on that. Like it just looks really good. So this, I would say, inspired by like tonally. Like I would say, if you want like a
I mean,
good
it
tone,
could be rated R.
especially adding into the fucking right there, like just giving us some of that. Like I wouldn't mind. I mean, it's gonna be on HBO. Oh, just Max, not HBO.
Just
It's
Max.
gonna be on
Well,
Max,
it's
so
gonna
they
be
can get away
yeah,
with shit. So
yeah.
add some sexy times in there. Sure, give Hal Jordan a break. Like the man's been through enough. Like as long as it's an adult human woman, guys, just give us that. There's the less said about that arc in the 70s, the better. But just, just give us like I'm just talking about like major like tones, like and
Right.
like vibes from this. This is mainly like a tone, not necessarily adapting the story. Just if you
Yeah,
just wanted something that looks pretty, I would say just flip through this. Like obviously you could read the story. It's a good story, but I would
right.
say when I was really thinking about like okay, stuff to like be inspired by, this was something that came up in terms of like what I think the tone should be, and I think they did that very well. Now, in
Yeah, and
terms, Oh yeah, no,
By the way, I
sorry.
just wanted to say, like, this to me feels like, DC is less of that Disney vibe that Marvel has had for years, where
Yeah,
they've obviously, in terms of ideas, they generally tend to play it safe because they're going for more of a family crowd, and it's more four quadrant movies. Whereas I think DC, they obviously were leaning in the other direction, but I don't know if Zack Snyder was necessarily the right one to drive that all the time.
mhm,
Um, as one of the voices, sure, but like I think this feels like James Gunn, if he goes in this, obviously Grant Morrison is a big part of his creative team, but stories like this, you're getting something that's unique that we haven't really seen
yeah,
cinematically in a cinematic universe. And at the same time, what you're getting is also something that's more mature in terms of the themes that it tackles. It's darker, but it has moments of levity, and it doesn't do it just with the visuals. You're not just going to get a muted color palette. I mean, you may not get a muted color palette at all. You may get something that's very colorful, or you may get something that's a bit muted. But in terms of the content of the stories, we're going to find ourselves watching something that distinctly feels different than what the Marvel movies and TV shows are generally giving us. I'm not saying everything Marvel is like that, because obviously you have Daredevil coming back, and it looks like if they are continuing what the Netflix Daredevil was, which it seems like they are now, then that's gonna have mature themes, and you're gonna see, blood, gore, and then you're gonna see, sex and violence and stuff like that.
mm,
And of course, we recently, what was the name of that show again? Echo on Hulu, which definitely got into that a bit more. So
mm.
I think in terms of DC kind of standing apart, and because the MCU is still going on, and when the DCU is going to be around in
Unfortunately,
a year or even later this year, it's gonna be a nascent universe that's just been born into existence, cinematically speaking. Even though the stories of the DCU will, roam across time, it will be compared to an MCU that's been around for over a decade. So, that still ends up being the yardstick in terms of at least the average audience, right? They're gonna make those comparisons, even if the hardcore fans don't. So they need to kind of stand apart. And I think we have talked about it before, the theme, the idea that the more unique your take is on some, like, not just a take, the more your story can stand out. Because for example, all the four movies from DC that more or less failed last year, I think Aquaman and 2 ended up making money, but the vast majority, the three other ones, they sort of, not just sort of, they flopped. And they
yeah,
flopped
hard.
because they were like formulaic in a lot of ways. I think Blue Beetle was a great movie, but if Blue Beetle came out back in 2008, 2010, people still had an appetite for that. I think today Blue Beetle felt very much by the numbers, kind of like, a lot of people said it was like Iron Man crossed over with Spider-Man, and yet it felt very much like it followed all the same plot points of the first Iron Man movie. Even though it had its unique set of characters and such, but it didn't stand out enough. It didn't feel like anything was fresh. Like even the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie. That's the thing about James Gunn that I like the most. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but
No, that's fine.
James Gunn as a creator has already shown us, just with the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies by themselves, that if you watch 1, 2, and 3, they feel like they're part of a whole, but each movie is very distinct and different,
Yeah,
like to the point where the first movie very much feels like an ensemble. The second movie very much feels like it's Peter Quill's story. And the third movie is very much Rocket's story. And visually, like the locations that they go to, the canvas, that the incredibly, the whole universe is their canvas, the whole galaxy is their canvas. Like that's James Gunn did a fantastic job of just utilizing all the pieces to his advantage, and I think that's something that for him to be, the big Kahuna, like overseeing this, I trust that we will get that variety. We will get something that stands out from the crowd, and the crowd right now is the MCU and Marvel, whether it's Sony Marvel or Disney Marvel. And DC has to kind of reestablish itself, because quite frankly last year the DCEU died, but a lot of the DC brand died with it, like in terms of its reputation, which, so it's like you got to hit
yeah.
rock bottom before you work your way up. But I think we're on the way. Hopefully, they can reestablish themselves, and
I hope so.
it gives me hope that we have somebody like Grant Morrison on the team.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. I think I just hope it's good because like it wasn't just the DCU that broke DC as a brand. Like the comics are just not as good, and I feel like that a lot of like just people are kind of sick of DC at this point. Like they're just kind of sick of like I don't want to see this shit anymore. Like I just kind of am done with it. And that's fine. I can definitely understand where they're coming from. Meanwhile, I am in an abusive relationship with DC. No matter how hard they hit, I'm somehow keep coming back. Um I just love these characters too much. So I'm like, I will get beaten and beaten again, but I still won't learn. But even then, I'll still talk about it because I do love DC. I do. Like, I just want to see them. Um, I'm like Iron Man. Like, I wanted you to be better. Like, do better. Like, come on, guys. Just it's not fucking hard. Just stop being
Yeah,
assholes, and you should be fine. But yeah, like stuff. Have stuff like this. Like, keep doing stuff like this, and just try to be good. But in
yeah,
terms of the other Green Lantern, more so from a an adaptation standpoint, I would want to say this isn't the actual comic, but it's from this run. But it's Green Lantern's Phantom Lantern, and this and Phantom Lantern brought in a more so of an interesting idea. It tied back to the origins of the Guardians, and I feel like they're doing that here. Like I feel like I don't know if it was part of the synopsis. I don't remember the synopsis specifically for Lanterns, except that it was like True Detective in space. But I actually really liked this run. I liked it more than Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. Like both were good, but I loved Green Lanterns mainly because of Jessica Cruz. She's my favorite Green Lantern, so that helped matter. She like really won me. Like within the first few issues of this, she really won me over in terms of a character. I thought they did that extremely well. And with that, Phantom Lantern, I think that was somewhere in the teens of like when it started. And it was, it was, the Phantom Lantern himself, Frank something. I don't remember his name, but I remember really liking that story because it's so like lore heavy in terms of Green Lantern. And I think that might be a reason why they wouldn't do it because it's steeped in a lot of knowledge of like Green Lantern stuff. And I think um if you did it bit by bit, I think it could be done it's a TV show, take advantage of that. And this is clearly a miniseries. So if you're doing the mystery of it, but also at the same time trying to introduce as much lore as you can, I think they could do that really well. Obviously, this is Baz and Cruz rather than Jordan and Stewart, like they're gonna do, but obviously you could just easily replace them.
I mean, they
But
had these 2 characters in the previous iteration of the show. Do you think that had a better chance of getting this kind of a story, and now it's less likely?
well, I don't know when the Green Lantern show was gonna happen because I don't know what came first because this came out in this story I think was 2019, 2018, 2019. Um,
Oh, yeah, that's around the
so
time. Yeah,
that was around the time it I think went to shit. I'm not too sure. I don't remember. Maybe it was I think it might have been after because I
well,
think COVID might
yeah,
have killed it
yeah.
partially. But I think just Phantom Lantern in terms of this character, hold on, I'm gonna look up his name because it's gonna bother me. But I like this is like heavy lore stuff. So I think if they kind of stick with that, and again, it's an ongoing mystery, it's intriguing, it's a lot of world building, a lot of very character driven. I think Phantom Lantern was definitely one of the more notable story arcs in Green Lanterns. I mean, all of it was like really, really good before they canceled it, but I think with this was just really noticeable because and not definitely not forgettable because of that lore, that world building, and that mystery. And I think if you do that properly, this I think obviously you don't have to specifically adapt this, but this in unlike Intergalactic Lawman, which was more about like the vibe and the tone, this is more like storyline heavy, where it's like I'd like to see this at least partially adapted or like put some new spin on it while also introducing, you know, like that, the Lancer thing, and it was Frank Leminski, which was that character. I thought what they did there was he is the Phantom Lantern, and I think it would make sense to have like the mystery have it be in regards to the Guardians, because the Guardians are so fucked up and they're intrinsically like horrible that you kind of gotta like do if you have a mystery, you kind of have to have them be the bad guys, or they did something that caused the bad guy. Krona's one of them, the controllers are another, Parallax is kind of another one, and Phantom Lantern is definitely one. But this is like kind of newer and in the public consciousness, and unlikelier to get adapted because it's not like a huge story. But I feel like all the other huge stories are a little bit too intrinsic on like other stuff that happened, like Emerald Twilight. You have to build up like Hal Jordan being the greatest Green Lantern and then him falling to Parallax. Or like, sorry if you hear police sirens, that's my bad. They're coming after me.
I think you dialed into the 6-star level on GTA or something. They must have used all the cheat codes.
But yeah, but yeah, I just think that a lot of the stuff is like a little bit too intrinsic on that. And with Phantom Lantern, it's not too like reliant on stuff that happened previously in comics, more so what happened like off screen. Like this was before, like this was at the dawn of the universe type shit. So I think if you like build that up, you could definitely make that work. And I really like that. And I think because it essentially what this storyline's about is like a guy who really wants to be Green Lantern. Like he trains himself, trains his body, trains his mind to be like the greatest Green Lantern, but then it just gets stripped away from him due to like not having that proper willpower. So then he gets introduced to Volthoom, who was a character slash like kind of body of that something happened at like the dawn of time and they have to like figure that out. So I think that would be really cool, and it brings in like ideas of like earning like your keep rather than give like what happens is Leminski was supposed to get the ring, but then the ring detected someone who was more compatible, who was Simon Baz. I think you could definitely introduce that aspect of like, if you make it so that like John Stewart is a newer Green Lantern, like he just became Green Lantern, like make it that like Frank Leminski was supposed to be Green Lantern, but then it went to John instead of, Simon Baz. I think you could definitely make that work. And I think that could really be interesting. And Volthoom is a really interesting character. And with how they did it, like really, it's just like the way they did like everything in regards to this story arc, I think, again, with world building and that kind of thing. So I think that would be really awesome. But I've spent a little bit too much time on Green Lantern, so let's move the hell on. But another one I wanted to bring up, moving on into the stuff that's not confirmed. Obviously, Brave and the Bold and Lanterns were confirmed. I wanted to do a movie and TV show that were not confirmed. And I thought Justice League was the easiest, because like we all want to see another take on Justice League after, what happened controversially beforehand. Let's try to get a good Justice. I mean, Marvel, they've gotten in the public consciousness, they've gotten 3 good Avengers movies. In my personal opinion, it's the one that everybody doesn't like is my favorite, and the only one I actually enjoy, but that's just me. But like, if Marvel fans can get a good Avengers movie, I just want DC fans to get a good Justice League movie. We almost got it in 2009, but the world was not on our side. So in terms of Justice League, obviously the place to go, not in terms of just tone, but I would say this is one of the few cases where if you adapt this straight up, pretty much, I would think you would get perfection. And that is the greatest Justice League story of all time. And that is Alex Ross and Jim Kruger's Justice. Oh, and yeah, I forgot to mention Sam Humphries wrote Phantom Lantern. I want to try to credit everybody. Um, but this is the best Justice League story we've ever gotten, period. Like, this is perfection. I think with James Gunn's sensibilities and his like vibe, I think this is something that would work well for him because he nails the cheesy aspects of comics and superheroes, but like folds it into the more serious aspects. Like, yeah, you could like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 starts out with, the Guardians fighting a giant squid monster, and then like and then like it turns out to be this deeply like thematic story about a father and son. And so like how that like or as well as sisters, and how like everything just kind of works together like perfectly. Can you tell Guardians 2 is my favorite MCU movie? So that just like kind of nailed it. Like that nailed, and I feel like Justice nails James Gunn's sensibilities because it is very much extremely Silver Age while balancing modern ideals. And I think Justice did that the best. Kingdom Come, yes, and I know that's inspiration heavy as well for James Gunn. I mean, using that crest, and there was a rumor that he wanted to use that for like Endgame DCU, where it was like, oh,
Yeah.
the final story would be Kingdom Come. So might as well do a story from the same guy, although he did not. Although Alex Ross wrote this, but he didn't write Kingdom Come. But same art, So might as well use like something that fits that vibe and something that can actually work as a prior, Justice League story. So I would say Justice, please use. This is just anybody who is anybody. Please read this story. I know Kingdom Come is the greatest DC story of all time, but Justice is perfect, and it seems like Dan has technical difficulties now. So I'm gonna move on. Justice. Justice is exceptional, and I think that would be the perfect.
I think your rant kicked me out there.
Sorry. I get passionate. My passion overtakes me. So if you want to make a Justice League movie, if you want to make a perfect Justice League movie, adapt the perfect Justice League comic. Now I kind of want to reread this. I think I might reread it tonight. So please, James Gunn, if you're listening, I know you're not, but if you are, make justice happen. We want it to happen because it's perfect and we love it. So, in terms of other Justice League stories, I think might as well circle back to Grant Morrison because your boy does so, or your non-binary guy, sorry, it does a lot of great shit. So might as well have another adaptation from them. And with that, I picked JLA New World Order, which is, the first time in like, I want to say like 15 years, maybe longer, maybe a little bit less, that like the heavy hitters Justice League came back together finally because, as you all know, Justice League International was the Justice League that came out after Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Right.
And that was like full of like lesser characters outside of like Batman and maybe Martian Manhunter. But this is like close to the OGs with the
I mean,
exception,
they've got Martian
yeah,
Manhunter in there. That's
Martian
not gonna
Manhunter, Wonder Woman, pretty much, and Superman with a mullet. We always love Superman with a mullet.
dude,
That's what
that's
we
the
want to see.
vibe.
And then instead of Barry Allen, um we have Wally West, and then instead of Hal Jordan, we have Kyle Rayner. But it's essentially that, and I think Plastic Man comes in later. But yeah, it's essentially that like heavy hitter Justice League again, like the original 7 in terms of superhero secret identity. That's what we got. This was like them coming together once again. So I think that's if they do plan to do, I know I had my theory of like our alternate Justice League that they might start with. I think this would be another good adaptation because it's simple. Alien invasion, and it's the White Martians. Boom, there you go. It introduces Martian Manhunter. Maybe he comes to Earth and he's aware of the threat. Like, oh hey, the White Martians are coming. You got your heroes need to help me stop them because this is gonna fuck me up. So I think that would be it's just like it's just too perfect in terms of like, okay, so we have a Justice League introduction. This was the first arc of Grant Morrison's run. So you're getting all these characters together. If you have the original 7 and you're getting these characters together, boom, have a story that is where the first issue is them coming together once again. And then on top of that, it's a fairly simple threat. It's not like, fucking New Gods or like, you know, Anti-Monitor, Entropy,
Cool.
like all these big heavy hitters. It's just White Martians. Like it's simple.
Yeah.
Like comic book simplicity, evil aliens coming to invade
It's
Earth.
a good, like, I think, comparison
Boom.
to what we saw in the first Avengers movie.
Yeah,
Because,
exactly.
the Chitauri come in and it's a Thor related story, but the whole team has to take it's a threat that's too big
Yep.
for Thor to handle by himself, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to. I think didn't they do this in Justice League, like the TV show, or like where they
I
had like a
never
whole.
watched it. You're
Well,
the
okay,
Timverse
I'm
expert,
pretty sure.
so
I'm pretty sure there was a 2 or 3 episode arc where
I
they and
wouldn't
that
be shocked. I wouldn't be
like where
shocked
they
if
did
that's
that. It
what
was
they
like
did.
part 1, part 2, part 3. I remember watching. And it was a
Yeah,
lot, like, even for, I mean, at that budget and just for television, I think they did a pretty good job of it, and turned that into a movie and add so much more nuance and give us something that not only
yeah,
establishes Martian Manhunter thoroughly, but also gives us a very good introduction into how this team works together. So,
right.
yeah.
So I think that I just think it's just kind of, as I said, weirdly perfect because it just kind of matches up. Like
Yeah.
if you want to introduce Justice League, have an arc that introduces them like side by side, like a good parallel, and adapt that, and then boom, and plus you get all these characters that we want to see, and something that's just damn good. And I think and Grant Morrison, you can't go wrong. Rarely do they miss, I think. Yeah, they got a couple stinkers here and there. But I think they've done a very good job, obviously, because like they're a legend. They are a legend for a reason. And so with that, we get to our final thing. I've mentioned this before. I want to see a question show. Please, for the love of God, give us the question. I don't care which question, as long as actually scratch that, as long as it's not the fucking new 52 fucking stupid version that they went with. That makes no fucking sense. Either Zaz, Vic Sage, or Renee Montoya. One of the two, I don't mind. Both of them are great for different reasons. So with that, might as well go with the the story that introduced I'm specifically the Vic Sage version because he's the OG and it works. Specifically, the Mysterious Suspense #1. Now, this was a one-issue thing that just introduced the character that Steve Ditko created. So I think that would be just a really good place to start. Again, not adapting it, just like kind of giving us the vibe of Steve Ditko's creation of like, okay, this is how he wanted to write this. So let's kind of like take those notes. This is more so from not a tone or a plot point, but like a vibe, like a vibe of the character, not necessarily vibe of the story itself. So I think personally, I think that like just like can't talk. Steve Ditko's creation, I would say just point to this. It's easy to get, you could find it anywhere online, and you know what? It just like it's one issue, so boom, you just read it real quick. It's like okay, this is the initial Steve Ditko creation.
It says
Boom,
he's
there you
in
go.
Derby, Connecticut.
So I think
Uh,
that's just
yeah.
honestly plain and simple. Like just do that. And I know I know he was also in back issues of Blue Beetle. Unfortunately, the Question was kind of a character that that didn't really kind of take off. Charlton Comics was like kind of a little bit awkward, and they kind of were like kind of trying to. It was like one of those like indie comic book lines of like the '60s where they were just kind of chucking everything at the wall to see what would stick. And even though Ditko did some good work, he also did the Ted Cord Blue Beetle was introduced there. So again, like as I said, it's one issue, gets the vibe of the character. Let's see how that works. And boom. So like simple enough. Just like if we want to specifically know the Steve Ditko version, then there you go. However, the other version I have is the introduction of the Denny O'Neil run, which reintroduced the character into DC lore, because as we all know, Charlton Comics was obviously separate, and then they got bought out by DC, and then after Crisis on Infinite Earths, all those characters got reintroduced. So with that, the Question was reintroduced by Denny O'Neil, another comic book legend, and I think his version of the character is probably the most popular in terms of the public zeitgeist now. Zen and Violence is specifically the name of that first comic book run, and it just kind of use it like, again, it's similar to my thoughts on New World Order for Justice League. This is just a story that reintroduces the character, or character rather than characters, and boom, so it's a starting point. Like that's kind of what I was like going for with a lot of it's a starting
Do you think this will work better as a TV show or as a movie? Like, how would you
I think
want
it
to
would
see
work better as a TV show, because there's a lot of, it's just like the Question is definitely one of those you could definitely nail like base, because I feel like the Question, you could do a lot of different stuff with this character, because he's gone through so many iterations that like for instance, this version, he after like having more of that objectivist sort of lens that Ditko had, that he kind of implanted on this character, Denny O'Neil came in. He gets his ass beat by Lady Shiva, and then she's like, all right, go to Richard Dragon, he'll help you. And so essentially, this version of Sage goes to Richard Dragon, learns martial arts, and also learns like Eastern philosophy and like kind of those like ideals. So it's like very like philosophy heavy in terms of this iteration of the character. And I think that could be like a very interesting way of like a guy who's like kind of the themes of like his objectivism versus, I don't know if he's like Buddhist specifically, but it was like Eastern philosophies essentially. I don't know if it was Taoism or Buddhism. I forget what it was specifically, but again, like Zen. I am oozing Zen. So like that versus like what he was before, and like kind of learning those. And it introduces a lot of characters that we would maybe want to see, like Lady Shiva, Richard Dragon, and a lot of those types of characters, and like kind of introducing more of the martial arts side of the DCU that you could introduce. And I think that would be really interesting as well. And I feel like the Question for like a show would be better, because I feel like it would be an ongoing thing. Like maybe
this could be.
it could be episodic or one case, kind of like what
I
Lanterns
look at this and like
case.
we were talking like Peter Safran and James Gunn. Well, from that press conference that they did a couple of years ago, they or last year, they have this tendency to want to like draw comparisons, because that's how you pitch something. Usually, it's kind of like this is that plus that, or this is like it could be XYZ of the DCU. Like what they did with Paradise Lost, this could be the Game of Thrones of the DCU. I think the Question could be like the X-Files of the DCU. Like that would give, like, I mean, I'm not saying bring in aliens or do bring in aliens, but you could definitely get like some. There's a lot of potential there. I think
Yeah,
story
and you could
wise.
definitely bring in some vibes from the
Yeah,
show from Justice League Unlimited, where he was essentially a conspiracy theorist. She's like,
yeah,
like it reminds me of the famous scene where it was like, so the Girl Scouts were in charge of the crop circles. He's like, yeah, but you'd never think of it, would you? Like that kind of like vibe. Like, I
yeah,
mean, I would love it if Jeffrey Combs would come back to play the Question, but I think he's too old at this point, especially when you have a character that's learning martial arts. I
yeah,
know Damian Lewis was my fan cast for a while, but I think he's getting too old. But like, I honestly, Keanu Reeves could probably be a good Question. But I would love to,
yeah.
just see
It
like
would be.
this kind of like character just really and there was like some rumor that this was in development hell for like 7 years, and then now they're like, oh well, now we're doing like this. It was like kind of announced, and then nothing was heard about it ever again. So I hope that this is on the back burner, because a TV show could be great. It could be one case per season. It could be an episodic case by case, kind of like what Dead Boy Detectives is, but also having something in the background. So I think, again, you can go really dark and horror-esque like one episode. You can bring in like aliens in another episode. You can bring in like an urban legend in another one, or it could just be a simple like racketeering thing or like an embezzlement thing. You can go like so many different levels, not just like the tone of the show, just have it be different episodes, like do this with this episode, do this episode, or not. It like, again, the Question is so versatile as a character, because you have the Denny O'Neil version, you have the Ditko version, you have the JLU version, and you have like others that like in between, obviously. So the
Yeah,
Question, I just want to see this character done and done right, and I would love to see it, and I feel like this would be a good starting point in terms of more adaptation than mysterious suspense. It's like
yeah.
mysterious suspense, maybe do that character, like solidify that character, and then kind of just build upon it with the Denny O'Neil version. So
I
with
mean,
all of that, I just those are the main, depending on what the storylines are, adaptation versus inspiration. You could pick and choose like different
you
things.
can mix in
These
the
are
pieces.
just storylines I'd like to
Yeah,
see in some form in these
right.
movies and TV shows. So
I mean, what's your favorite one out of all these that you definitely want to see
I think
brought in?
that's pretty
That's
obvious.
this. That's
Like,
fair,
I would
dude.
love to see
That would be a really epic way to introduce the Justice League
Oh
team in
yeah.
this DCU. I agree with you 100%. I think that to me that I mean the cover itself is iconic. Like it's
Yeah.
just
Like you
it's
could
smart.
turn to any
So
page and like it can be
yeah,
something you hang on your wall. I mean, look at that.
right.
Like
Yeah,
that, and
that's a
then I mean
poster.
that's just Alex
Yeah.
Ross in general.
That's just like the poster design is right there. You don't even have to worry about like just
Yeah, like
just
look at
use
that.
that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like it's perfect. And
They can easily pay homage to all of those like the iconic
oh yeah.
images from the comics
Oh
and
yeah.
like the marketing and the movie itself. I mean, this is like Zack Snyder was great at bringing in some of those inspirations visually. Like you got the Dark Knight Returns image in BVS when he's like on the roof, like running away from Doomsday, and he's shooting his batarang. Um, so yeah, I mean, overall, as far as when it comes to the DCU, they've got their a lot of the some of the greatest of our current generation comic book writers on the team, the creative team. They've already hashed out a lot of ideas, and we are seeing them already in progress as they're shooting Peacemaker. I think Waller might already be in production, and we just don't know about it. We know Superman is in production. We know Supergirl is going to go into production soon, and whether it's Grant Morrison or any of the other creators that we know James Gunn is closely working with, it bodes well that they have these people involved because they know these characters and stories better than anyone else that you can possibly bring in who's going to come in as let's say a director like J.J. Abrams, for example. Which nothing against J.J. Abrams, but he wouldn't necessarily have the background to kind of treat the stories with the same kind of respect because even if they read up, like even Christopher Nolan, I think a lot I love Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, but I know that the DC fans that don't love his movies don't love it because they're like he took it kind of in a very different direction than what the comics did, and So, you know, I don't mind kind of balancing that out as long as you still give the directors of the movies their fair amount of room and space to do what they need to do, which I think, you know, any good leader of the team, like a Kevin Feige does. He gives their directors enough of a sandbox to play in, but at the same time that they follow like an overall plan. I think James Gunn, he's already showing that he's, you know, bringing a very different, distinct and unique vision. And Peter Safran, I really trust as a producer to give us something that's going to be you know, stories driven by the storytellers, not so much that we're getting this overarching plan where everything looks the same, feels the same. And DC has the depth of, you know, characters and stories that they can tell in wildly different, whether it's movies or TV shows. Like Lanterns will probably look very different than the Superman movie, and the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is probably going to look very different from Peacemaker, and yet these characters will cross paths. And of course, we already know Frank Grillo is going from Creature Commandos into Peacemaker season 2, so there's going to be a lot of crossover, and I love that. I think that's the kind of thing that we've been getting in the animation world from DC for years, and then I think we're finally going to start to get that in the live action world. So yeah, I mean, hey John, this has been great. I mean, I love talking about this. Like, we can talk about this all day.
course.
We have been talking about it for the better part of an hour, and you know, we'll be back tomorrow with more DC news and updates. There's a lot of new casting updates that we've got to talk about. There's a new logo for Creature Commandos, which kind of looks like the comic book version of the logo, but you know, we'll dive into that. John, do you have anything else that you wanted to add, or
Adapt justice, please.
please?
It's so good.
That's I agree with you on that, because you know, not for nothing, if the Justice League, I think, is probably, I mean, I think it's, when you compare all the different superhero teams, Justice League is the best family of superheroes that we have in the world of comics, and we just haven't quite done them justice quite the way that they should. So yeah, as far as, huh?
Yeah, ironic they haven't been done justice.
Yeah.
I don't have friends. I got family.
Verified family.
Yeah, right. Well, speaking of, I don't know, my brain's tired. We'll just wrap it up there. We'll get back to talking about DC, Justice League, family, and you know, all that other good stuff. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to be reviewing If, which is a very family-friendly movie, and Angelina is going to be on the show talking about it. We'll be talking about Creature Commandos updates. We'll be diving into other things. John, I'm sure you're going to probably get hit with the family once or twice. We're all fans of Don Toretto here.
I'm not, but you insist upon it, so I'll just take it. It's fine.
Yeah, you're just gonna. It's kind of like, you know, like an apple. It's like a cream pie to the face. Just gonna. All right. On that note, we're gonna call it a show. We'll see you guys on the next one,
You're
and
kind
go
of
out there and watch
hilarious at
some
this point.
BBC.
Let's head out.
Really. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking. Yeah, I'm gonna, like, before I. Anyway, we'll be back on the show tomorrow, and we'll talk about all the good DC stuff, and I'm sure even more so than that, we have some news in Hollywood that we want to talk about, as we always do, and we'll look ahead to what is will be a fantastic week for movies next week with the Garfield movie, as well as, of course, Furiosa, a Mad Max story. So it's going to be a busy summer movie season, and we're just getting started. And you know, keep sticking around here on DCU Daily, on the Oh So Curious show. Stick around on the channel, like and subscribe as always. That helps us out, and we'll be back tomorrow. And until then, John, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time on DCU Daily.